This is VOA News. Via remote, I'm Marissa Melton. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson on Thursday announced his resignation after a mass revolt of top members of his government. AP correspondent Karen Chamas has more.
It is clearly now the will of the Parliamentary Conservative Party that there should be a new leader of that party and therefore a new Prime Minister.
The Prime Minister spoke outside of number 10 Downing Street amid a chorus of cheers and the occasional boo as he admitted that his party wanted him gone.
In politics, no one is remotely indispensable.
Showing his usual charisma that helped him to get to the top job, Johnson explained he didn't really want to go.
I want you to know how sad I am to be giving up the best job in the world. But them's the breaks.
After 3 tumultuous years in power, the brash 58-year-old politician who took Britain out of the European Union and steered it through COVID-19 and the war in Ukraine was brought down by one scandal too many. This one involving his appointment of a politician who had been accused of sexual misconduct. I'm Karen Chamas.
The European Union's Parliament on Thursday overwhelmingly condemned the end of constitutional protections for abortion in the United States and called for such safeguards to be enshrined in the EU's Fundamental Rights Charter. Lawmakers adopted the resolution in a vote of 324 to 155. There were 38 abstentions. National laws determine the status of abortion in individual EU countries. It is legal and practiced without much political opposition in many member nations, but it's banned in Malta and it's increasingly restricted in Poland. You can keep up on this story and all the stories we're covering at our website, voanews.com. From Washington, this is VOA News. In the United States, the Minnesota police officer convicted of killing George Floyd in 2020 has been sentenced for violating Floyd's civil rights. AP correspondent Norman Hall has that story.
Federal Judge Paul Magnuson sentenced Derek Chauvin to 21 years in prison for violating George Floyd's civil rights. Magnuson told the former officer that what he did was simply wrong and offensive. Chauvin pinned Floyd to the pavement outside a Minneapolis corner store for more than 9 minutes as he lay dying. Magnuson, who presided over the federal trial and convictions of 3 other officers at the scene, blamed Chauvin alone for what happened. Chauvin was by far the senior officer on the scene. He will serve the federal sentence at the same time he serves his 22.5-year sentence on state charges of murder and manslaughter. I'm Norman Hall.
American basketball player Brittany Griner pleaded guilty to possession of cannabis oil in a Russian court on Thursday. Griner said in court that she did not intend to break Russian law. The WNBA star could face 10 years in prison. She's due back in court July 14th. The rights group Human Rights Watch said Thursday that Taliban forces in Afghanistan have extrajudicially killed dozens of people suspected to be members of or linked to Islamic State. The global human rights group said the alleged offenses were committed in eastern Nangarhar and Kunar provinces. It said local residents have discovered the bodies of more than 100 men dumped in canals and other locations since August of last year. A UN study released Thursday shows the first 3 months of the war in Ukraine have driven up the global cost of fuel and food, creating record inflation that has helped drive 71 million people into poverty. VOA's Jeff Custer has more.
Officials with the UN Development Program said the study analyzed 159 developing countries and shows the war-driven price spikes in key commodities had immediate and devastating impacts on the world's poorest households. Speaking virtually at a Geneva news conference, UNDP senior economist George Gray Molina said the economic shock of Russia's invasion of Ukraine came after 18 months of COVID-19 pandemic lockdowns.
With COVID, what we saw is effects that was slow and cumulative, but had a very strong impact over time. So the official estimates are about 125 million people falling into poverty over about 18 months. So what we find right now is that 3 months of inflation have drawn about 71 million people into poverty.
The study offers several recommendations to address the issue, suggesting, for example, multilateral investment banks such as the International Monetary Fund could provide more capital to allow nations to specifically address their needs. Jeff Custer, VOA News, Washington.
Via remote, I'm Marissa Melton. This is VOA News. This is VOA News. Via remote, I'm Marissa Melton. Former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe of Japan, the longest-serving Japanese leader, has been assassinated. AP correspondent Donna Warder has a report.
Abe was just minutes into a speech at a train station in western Japan when shots rang out, as captured by public broadcaster NHK. The video shows Abe collapsing on the street with security guards running toward him. He holds his chest and his shirt is smeared with blood. Then security guards leap on top of the suspected gunman. What appears to be a handmade gun is seen on the ground. The 67-year-old Abe was pronounced dead at a hospital. I'm Donna Warder.
Reaction is pouring in from around the world. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who's visiting Indonesia, called the assassination of Abe shocking and profoundly disturbing and described him as a leader of great vision. A spokesperson for the Chinese embassy in Japan said former Prime Minister Abe made contributions toward improving China-Japan relations during his term. Italian Prime Minister Mario Draghi said Italy is shocked by this terrible attack, which hits Japan and free democratic debate. Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese called Abe's death devastating news. He said Mr. Abe was one of Australia's closest friends on the world stage. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said he was stunned and deeply saddened by the news, and French President Emmanuel Macron tweeted on Friday that Japan has lost a great prime minister. U.S. President Joe Biden has ordered U.S. flags flown at half-staff in the United States until sunset on Sunday. This is VOA News. Former Trump White House counsel Pat Cipollone has had an 8-hour private interview with the January 6th committee on Friday. Cipollone has been a sought-after witness over his role trying to prevent then-President Donald Trump from challenging the 2020 presidential election and joining the violent mob at the Capitol. The former Trump counsel was subpoenaed for his testimony. In stunning testimony last week, the panel was told by former White House aide Cassidy Hutchinson that Cipollone warned the defeated president would be charged with, quote, every crime imaginable if he went to the Capitol on January 6th to try and stop the certification of Joe Biden's election as president. Another dispute has arisen over the law enforcement response to a school shooting in Uvalde, Texas in May that left 21 people dead. AP correspondent Norman Hall has the story.
Uvalde Mayor Don McLaughlin has challenged a new report that alleges missed chances to quickly end the massacre at Robb Elementary, one of the deadliest classroom shootings in U.S. history. McLaughlin said no Uvalde police officers saw the gunman outside the school before he went inside, and that none of the officers had an opportunity to fire on the shooter. Those comments contradict the findings released this week by tactical response experts at Texas State University. McLaughlin has previously accused state police officials of publicly giving an incomplete and one-sided account of an ongoing investigation. He says dozens of state troopers were also at the school at the time of the breach. I'm Norman Hall.
Employers in the United States added a surprisingly strong number of jobs last month. AP Washington correspondent Sagar Meghani has more.
It's a sign of resilience amid high inflation and slowing economic growth. 372,000 jobs added in June. The unemployment rate remains 3.6%, the lowest in nearly half a century. The robust hiring has paid off for job seekers as employers pay more to fill slots. But the Federal Reserve may see that as fueling inflation, since companies are boosting prices to offset higher salaries. The June gain may spur the Fed to keep sharply boosting interest rates in a bid to cool the economy and inflation. Sagar Meghani, Washington.
British Conservative Rishi Sunak on Friday declared his candidacy to become the party's next leader. The former finance minister's resignation from Prime Minister Boris Johnson's cabinet helped spark an exodus of other ministers. And once again, our top story this hour, former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, the longest-serving Japanese leader, was assassinated earlier Friday while giving a political speech. Via remote, I'm Marissa Melton. This is VOA News.